The Leave Your Legacy podcast is supported by Wise Financial. Wise Financial is a Northwestern Mutual private client group member. For over 20 years, Wise Financial has dedicated its efforts to designing comprehensive wealth management strategies for business owners and many accomplished athletes. Through their efforts, Wise Financial has been recognized as an industry-leading firm. The Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hello and welcome to the Leave Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Keegan Murray, and today we have a very special guest. He is a broadcast professional who currently is play-by-play announcer. He's a pre- and post-game host for the Sacramento Kings, Kyle Draper. Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
My man, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do this.
Absolutely. Well, I know you're coming off of one of the most exciting seasons for the Sacramento Kings in a long time, and we'll definitely get into that. But being a broadcaster, people would think like your life was filled with sports growing up. So tell our audience a little bit about growing up in Philly and what kept young Kyle Draper going as far as sports and things like that.
Yeah, so I grew up in Philadelphia. Mom and dad had an older brother, younger sister, and in Philly, the houses are row houses. So they're all like together. And so really a normal day for me would be just go outside and see who was out, and play in the streets, whether it was football or basketball. I never played organized football, but we played what we call street football.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, you know what I mean? 2-hand tag, into the cars and everything like that. Had to stop when the traffic was coming. But really, basketball was my true love, man. I grew up in the days, and you'll appreciate this, Kenyon. We didn't have the indoor facilities to go to, my man. We built our own hoops. We had the crates hanging up on light poles out there. You know what I mean? We had the wooden backboards that we built. That we put up in the driveways. And so, but basketball was my love. I was playing outside every day, played high school ball at Parkway High School in Philadelphia, had a D2 offer, decided not to take that, tried to walk on at Temple University back when John Chaney was there, Aaron McKee, Eddie Jones, and I didn't quite make it. But basketball was my thing, man. If it wasn't, school or hanging with the family, you could find me hooping, playing ball.
Gotcha. Speaking of John Chaney, I actually got to meet him. This is kind of an offshoot. Like I said, this will kind of go where it goes. But Mark Macon was a player. He was from Michigan, and Mark was a phenomenal player at Temple University. And actually, that kind of opened up the door, being, growing up in Michigan myself, of even thinking about going there. And the one thing I loved about it, black head coach, and John Chaney was an unbelievable coach. But then I was a defensive guy, and you couldn't play at Temple if you didn't play defense. Right. So that was one of those schools that I really thought about. But growing up in the Big Ten, man, that's where kind of I stayed and obviously planted my roots. So, but that's cool. That's cool that you
man.
You tried
Coach Chaney was amazing, man, and he had those legendary 6 a.m. practices. I don't know if you would have been able to handle that thing or not. Those 6 a.m., 5:30, 6 a.m. practices every day. But you're right about his defense. He had that amoeba defense too, remember? Yeah. Where it was like a matchup zone that he would play a lot too. And so that was during Temple's heyday. And you bring up Mark Macon. He's an assistant coach at Temple now, actually. I just saw him earlier this year. Yeah, so he's doing well out there, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you don't play at Temple, but you go to Winona State, correct? And get a community. So how did you end up a Philly guy at Winona State University?
Hey, you know how it is, man. Most of our stories have to do with a girl, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so this was in the mid-'90s. This was in the days of AOL and the chat rooms. And I met a girl who lived in Minnesota. And, we were talking and everything. She's like, well, if we're going to try this, we can't be doing this long distance. And so back then I was pretty wild, Kenyon. I might be straight-laced now. You know what I mean? I might be, Mr. P's and Q's right now. But back then, I was pretty wild. And so I went to visit her. And then I came home the next week and I told my mom and dad, I said, I'm transferring. I'm gonna go to Winona State out there in Minnesota, to try it with this girl. Yeah. I could go to school anywhere. And there you have it. The crazy thing was I was an engineering major in school at Temple and then my first year at Winona State. But I could not pass this one math class, Kenyon. I failed it once and dropped it twice. And so it got to a point where it was like, all right, dude, the writing's on the wall. What are you going to do with yourself?
Yeah.
You're a C student at best. You can't pass this math class. Engineering doesn't look like it's going to be in your future. And fortunately, at the time, my roommate, he was a sports broadcasting major.
Okay.
And I knew I liked sports. I loved watching it on TV. So I said, let me give this a shot. Why not? Let me try this out. And overnight, King, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I went from struggling to making the dean's list, all A's. It was just like a light came on for me, man. And then the rest is history.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Because, yeah, I was thinking, I remember, sending you the questions. It's like, was that something you always had? So I think everybody's story is unique. And that's the one thing I love about the podcast and the guests that come on like yourself is you get to hear that story that maybe not a lot of people learn because they're like, you're so good at what you do. That just had to be your focus. But a lot of times the things that we think we want to do early on in life aren't the things we end up doing as our profession or our passions or that become our careers. So that's a great story to tell and how you got into broadcasting and now you're thriving at it. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Let me tell you really quickly too, man, what's so funny about it. My uncle at the time was a civil engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how it is. You got family members. You should be like your uncle. You should grow up to be like your uncle. They make good money. You're good at math and science. So it was never really a passion of mine, but it was what the people around me said I should do, And I said, all right, sure. Why not? Let me give it a shot. But what I come to realize is, and I tell kids when I speak to them now, it's like, you don't have to have it all figured out in 11th, 12th grade freshman year, know? And I thought I had it figured out, but clearly I didn't. I didn't become a broadcasting major until my junior year, second half of my junior year. And so while, everybody was in my ear about being an engineer, it really wasn't my passion. Right. I tell kids, follow your passion, and I'll be honest, I've worked hard to get to this point, but I don't feel like I got a job. I don't feel like I'm working. I mean, I'm a basketball junkie, man. So I'm getting paid to do what I love. And so it all worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, I think today more than ever, your passion can become your profession. I mean, so much easier than maybe we had it. But a lot of it too is like, hey, you're going to go to school. Like you said, mom said you're going to school, you go to college, you do this, you do that, everything's kind of in a box. But now, there's just the ability. And I said that too, working in a junior college, I told kids like, 4-year schools aren't for everybody, or going this way may not be for you. And sometimes even back then it seemed foreign to a lot of kids, but like I used to ask them like, what do you like to do? And I remember a story about a CD student, like he barely graduated high school, but he was really into, I said, just come visit the campus. And I showed him the robotics and laser program. And he's like, he loved it. He comes down there. He's a straight A student. He graduates in 2 years, gets hired by Texas Instruments, and the kid's thriving. So yeah, sometimes, the path that others have for us is not the path that's for us.
Right.
When we're forward. So you spent 11 years. So broadcasting, okay. So you go to broadcasting, then you hit the market. I mean, you hit the legendary market of sports when you talk about Boston. And so you were there for 11 years. So what was the best thing about it? And I know I asked, like, what was your most memorable sports experience while you were in Boston? It's probably a lot in 11 years, but first, how did you get there? And then what was the most memorable experience you had there?
Well, I was doing sports in Louisville, Kentucky, which, as you know, is another great sports market.
Right.
That's an awesome college market, man. I like to liken Louisville, their college market, to the pros. Like they treat University of Louisville, University of Kentucky, Indiana University like a pro franchise. You cover it every day. But then this opportunity came in Boston. And I remember thinking, this was in the late 2000s. And I used to watch ESPN Sports Center a lot. Mm-hmm. And all the Boston teams would be in the A block of Sports Center, like the Patriots. If something happened with them, it'd, be at the top of the show. Red Sox, Bruins, Celtics. And I was like, there's no better sports market in the country than Boston right now.
Right.
And so I go to Boston with, back then it was Comcast Sportsnet. Now it's NBC Sports Boston. And I was just an anchor. So I covered all the sports, but quickly, Kenyon, I got there in 2009. By 2010, I was on the Celtics beat. Started, because they knew I had the passion for basketball. And so you ask what my greatest memory was from that experience. It was covering the 2010 NBA Finals, Lakers, Celtics.
Yeah.
Now, you know how that is, man.
Yeah.
As basketball fans, those are the two franchises at the top. I grew up, as an 80s kid. I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s. Magic and Bird, those were the guys that went at it. And so I got to cover the 2010 NBA Finals. I was out in LA for all the games, Boston for all the games. And I remember sitting there at Staples Center at the time thinking, I'm a kid from inner city Philadelphia, and here I am courtside covering Lakers, Celtics. I mean, you can't tell me anything, man. I was on top of the world. Like, it was a dream come true. And so I was very early in my tenure there in Boston, but man, that's still to this day probably my most memorable moment.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that would be pretty cool to be on the sidelines for that. So maybe I'll get to an NBA Finals and be able to sit courtside sometime in the near future.
Hey, tell Keegan and Chris, get them shots up, bro.
I know,
get them up.
I know. Yeah, for sure. So I did read, so you make the move to Sacramento, but I read that you said when it came to the Sacramento Kings opportunity, you couldn't pass it up. Why was that?
First of all, to be called an NBA play-by-play announcer, come on, man. Somebody like that looks like me. There wasn't too many of us doing it at the time. Mark Jones, obviously, who I work with. But when you looked around the landscape of the NBA, it was like, we got 70+% of the players being African-American, but no broadcasters, local broadcasters for teams at that time, African-American. I think Eric Collins in Charlotte might have been the only one at that time. And so I said to myself, remember, I'm a huge basketball fan. I love the NBA. Like, my earliest NBA memory was Magic beating the Sixers in the the Sixers beating Magic in the 83 NBA Finals, Sixers beating the Lakers. That's my earliest memory. So I always was an NBA fan. And then this opportunity came up and they said, Kyle, you're going to get to talk NBA basketball every day. You're going to get to be the play-by-play announcer. You're going to get one of the best seats in the arena every single night. And so it was a no-brainer for me. I was a basketball fan. I love the sport. I love the league. And, while Boston was great, so many great times there, so many great sports, I thought I had reached a plateau in Boston.
Okay.
I was the pre and post game host for the Celtics in Boston. I could have done that for another 20 years, but I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted more. And play-by-play is the hardest job I've ever had to do. And so that challenge, was very attractive to me. And I said, you know what? I had young kids at the time. I said, if I'm going to make this move, it has to be now before my son gets into high school. And then you don't want to pull him out of high school and all that. And so that's why it was a no-brainer at that time.
Gotcha. And I think you said, too, like, your wife was on board, but it was probably a little, with the kids, they're a little reluctant to make the move across the country. But as you and I have talked, seems like they're settling in. They've settled in pretty well in Sacramento then.
Yeah, exactly. They still talk to their Boston friends. It's crazy how the world works right now. You could be halfway across the world, but you can still talk to your best friend, see your best friend, play video games with your best friend, and FaceTime. And that's what my kids do. They're still very much connected to their friends in Boston, but they have a good tight-knit group here as well. And so you remember back in the day growing up, man, your friends were just the people in your neighborhood.
Right.
Really, you didn't envision the world being as big as it is and having connections. But nowadays, man, these kids, they got connections to people all over.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that's awesome. Well, I know you only been there since 2020, right? So what did it mean to the city, the franchise, to finally break this playoff drought that they've had for the last 16, almost 17 years? I mean, coming into it, you had to feel it. And then to have the season we had this year was unbelievable. Obviously, personally vested in it. But what do you think it meant to the franchise and the city to break through like they did this year?
I feel like it was sort of like, you're one of 30 teams, but you feel like you're at the bottom of the list. You feel like nobody respects you. And that's how I felt the first couple of years I was in SAC. It was almost like a defeatist attitude. Instead of believing that the team could win, the fan base and some would think, how are we going to lose this game? And to have that transform this season with Mike Brown and some of the additions that they made, it was tremendous to see the pride that the city had in their team. And I'll tell you, Kenyon, like my first 2 seasons in Sacramento, I was a little concerned. I was a little worried because I felt like what I did not matter to people. I go to the grocery store. Nobody was talking about the Kings.
Right.
I go hang out with friends. Nobody wanted to talk about the Kings. So it was like I was, had this fun, cool job, but nobody was watching. Nobody was really caring.
Yeah.
And now after this season, man, people are, coming up to me in the grocery store. People are asking for tickets. Like everybody, people want to take pictures. It's like, it feels good to know that what I'm doing, people are actually paying attention to.
Yeah. And
it's because of the success of the team, man. And, I knew this fan base was always great. I remember back in the heyday, when Weber and those guys were playing, how awesome it was to play here. It was one of the toughest places in the NBA to play.
Yeah.
But for the past 16, 17 years, you just didn't feel that. It was just like, a loser's mentality almost.
Yeah.
But now, midway through the season, they expected to win every game. Even if they were down by 10 going in the fourth, it would be like, man, the Kings aren't out of this. All they need to do is make a run. And it was just amazing. And so I think it put Sacramento back on the map when it comes to basketball. Having Mike Brown win the Coach of the Year, Monty Executive, Fox Clutch, couple of all-stars, Keegan, top 5 in all rookie voting. And so I just think it's a proud moment for a city that's, when it comes to a franchise that's probably been ridiculed endlessly over the last 16 years.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's interesting too, and I'll ask you about Keegan, but going into the draft, like Sacramento was one of the teams that he didn't work out for. And the reason he didn't work out for was because there was like a delay in the flight. He ended up having to fly to San Francisco to meet with Coach Brown and, then get to Sacramento. But going into it, he felt really good coming out of it because of what was going on there with Mike and Monty. And then, his agent, Mark Bartelstein, has known Mike for a long time and just kind of that relationship. But when it happened, it was kind of like, we were like, yeah, like even McKenna, now granted, McKenna wanted to go to SAC because she saw the weather but compared to Iowa. But, going on to my next question was selfishly, like I wanted to ask, like what impressed you more about Keegan? What impressed you about Keegan both on and off the floor? Because as his dad, I have one view and, we've talked basketball. And so I think I'm pretty good at looking at it outside of that parent perspective. But what was it about him that impressed you on and off the floor this season?
I'll tell you a quick story before I answer that question, because I remember the morning of the draft, that day the Kings had a draft party, like a watch party out at Doco. And I was trying to figure out, who are they going to draft? Who are they going to draft? I like Jaden Ivey. I thought he had tremendous upside. But then I looked at the makeup of the team and who would help this team the most, who would come in and fit in. And I went on stage and they said, Kyle, any predictions? I said, yeah, they're going to draft Keegan Murray. Now, that's not because I talked to Monty or had any insight. But I thought, Keegan would fit in perfectly. And we see he has. And I'm a firm believer that fit is just as important as, the number that you're drafting. I have a belief, and I might be wrong with this, but I always say, if Kawhi Leonard doesn't start his career in San Antonio, does he become Kawhi Leonard?
Right.
And so I think, the fit was perfect here in Sacramento with Keegan. And so you asked me what impressed me the most is that here you are, the number 4 overall pick. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, Kenyon. He still seems to be the same kid that grew up in your house. Like, this newfound fame, fortune. I don't know, maybe he does have an ego behind closed doors, but he seems to be humble, respectful. He doesn't carry himself, and I'm talking off the court, as somebody who thinks he's better than others, like very respectful when I talk to him. And, and I'm looking at him like, dude, you're the number 4 overall pick. You're, about to be one of the faces of the franchise, but yet his humility. On the court, I think he obviously has this even keel, but I think what he showed us in the playoffs at Golden State, Game 3, first playoff game ever for him on the road, hostile environment. What did he finish with? 21, I think, something like that.
I think it was it Game 3? Yeah, Game 3. 23.
23, 23. So that showed me he's built for this moment, Yeah. And I thought after the first 2 games, things didn't go quite as well, but then he started to figure it out. And, so that impressed me to take his game on the road, Game 4, hit big shots, have a great game. Sure, they came up short. I'm talking about Game 4, it was. But that showed me he didn't get rattled. You know what I mean? And so that's what impressed me the most. Obviously, he didn't get too up or too down. And from a basketball standpoint, the thing I loved about him, he didn't try to do too much.
Right.
A lot of times rookies come into the league, they try to show everything off their first month into the league. They try to get in their bag. They try to go one-on-one. And I know there's many different layers to his game, but the way he came in, he did what can help the team win. And as the season went on, he added more and more to his game. And so you and I have talked about it. He's just now scratching the surface. I can't wait to see some of his playmaking abilities, some of his, dribble drive action, putting it on the deck. And so, no, I'm excited, man. But I think, when you look at, he's probably been the most impactful rookie in the league this season in terms of affecting winning.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hell of a compliment.
No, for sure. And I think this season for him was like 2 seasons. And we talked about it early on. It was like, what do you need to do to be on the floor, and help the team win? And we talked about the first part of the season being like his freshman year at Iowa, where it was you play defense, you rebound, you don't make mistakes. And then kind of the second part of the season was like his sophomore year where he was able to show a little bit more and, he got more opportunities and things like that. And then towards the end of the season into the playoffs, he started, like you said, started to show some different things. And to me, that was like his Big Ten tournament run at the end of his sophomore year where people like he really became – a top 10 pick, a lottery pick in people's eyes because of that run. And they started to see things they hadn't seen before out of him that entire season. So for me, this one season has been like 2 seasons at Iowa for him.
Right.
And he does have confidence and he says that, but he's one of those guys that he knows he's always learning, and he's got some great guys around him. I think he credits so many of the guys on the team. You really can't pick out one guy on the roster because everybody's giving him something, whether it was Delly, being another coach on the bench for him, or Domas always patting him on the back, keeping him up, HB, all these guys, Foxy, Monk, Monk kind of kept him up and going when he wasn't playing well on the bench. And so all these guys, I really felt like it was like a college type team for him. And so, I'm excited for, what his future holds. He got back out last night and he's already in Chicago working out with Chris this morning. So, that's, yeah. So he's, not only does he want to continue to get better, but he also wants to help his brother be ready for him to make that jump. So yeah, man. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think he's I don't know. I was just so excited for him to make the adjustments in the playoffs that he did in that
Right.
series. I mean, he was two different players, if you think about
Yeah,
it.
he was. Yeah.
So I like that. So get a little personal here, and I know you and I connected on this, and I think one of the things, and I'll say it as a black man, to be able to be vulnerable and open about things that are going on in our lives is not something that you see a lot of, and there needs to be more of it. But you recently made a public declaration of being 6 years sober. And, my question to you was, when or what was a moment that you're like, I have an issue with alcohol, and what has helped you get to this, moment of being 6 years sober?
Yeah, it's funny because I never thought I was an alcoholic. You know
Right.
what I mean? I never thought I had a problem, really. You know, I was one of those social drinkers. Like, I would only drink when I went out,
Mm-hmm.
hung with friends. But my problem was I couldn't just have one drink or two drink. It would turn into 3, 4, 5. It was, and so at that same time, I had gone to the doctor and I was diagnosed pre-diabetic.
Mm.
My A1C levels, were right there, like right there. And I thought, man, health wise, drinking's not helping me. Personally, if I kept on this path of drinking, socializing, things like that, I would get a DUI, wife would leave me, whatever it may be.
Right.
And so I said, you know what? I'm going to stop. And I was in therapy at the time. And I talked to my therapist about it. And she's like, Kyle, don't look at it as you're going to stop drinking forever. Look at it as you're not going to drink on this day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get social anxiety. I'll openly admit that. And so when I went to the bars, I always had to have a drink in my hand. Always had to have a drink in my hand. And then I remember I went on a trip overseas. I went to, where'd I go? Ireland. And I met up with some Celtics fans at a bar. I did like a meet and greet at a local bar. And I got to the bar earlier. And I went to the bartender and I'm like, hey, man, what do people who don't drink alcohol drink? He said, well, they drink mocktails, soda, or non-alcoholic beer. And I wasn't a beer drinker at all. But I said, all right, let me try a non-alcoholic beer. And I can't tell you the psychological impact it had on me. I had a non-alcoholic beer, but because it looked like alcohol, in my mind, people, didn't look at me a weird way. Like if I wasn't drinking before, I used to think, man, people are going to judge me. They're going to look at me and think I'm corny or whatever it may be. But I had this non-alcoholic beer in my hand, and psychologically, it changed how I felt about being there. Wow. And so then from that point on, like I said, I was never a beer drinker, but I started getting mocktails or even, soda, so I still had something in my hand. It just wasn't alcohol, but it changed me psychologically. I will say, stopping drinking is one of my greatest accomplishments. My career has taken off, but from a personal standpoint, you have to really take a close look at who's your friends, who are your friends and who aren't. The people that I hung with when I drank, I came to realize were more just drinking buddies.
Right.
Like after I took away the alcohol, we didn't have much in common.
Right.
Yeah. It just wasn't as fun. And so that's still a daily struggle of mine, man. I went to one AA meeting and they said, when you stop drinking, there's like a hole in your heart. And you try to find something to replace that. And I'm still working on that. I'm still trying to find that replacement, man. So yeah, it's been 6+ years. It's been a struggle every day, man, to be honest with you, because especially, and when you got the stresses of life, the stresses of marriage, the stresses of parenthood, some days life is tough, man. It's hard. And you just want to let loose. And I will say I haven't reached for that bottle or anything like that. So I feel great about that. But man, it's been some tough times and I've thought about it. But, fortunately, I've been able to stay strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I talked too about like some of the struggles Michelle and I had, as and as a family, the things we've gone to, and to be here, it's amazing to be here. But yeah, like life happens, and
Right.
I was the same way. And I realized like I was drinking to numb the things that I didn't want to deal with. And when you numb one thing, you numb everything. And so,
Right.
the anxiety, I'm just taking that, where that helped you kind of deal with that. Now, what are the other things that you're missing, whether it's, like connecting with your wife or your kids or,
right.
There's so many things that can come out of that. But like you said, being able to, go day by day, and it just opens you up to so many more things. I know from my standpoint, it's allowed me to be more open with people. Like you and I had lunch and we just talked, and it wasn't like it was uncomfortable or awkward. It was just two guys talking about life. And I think that's the one thing that I've gained more out of it. And like I said, for you to come on and tell us about your story, like, to me, I appreciate that, because I know that for a lot of people, it's really, really hard. So thank you. Thank you for being open and vulnerable, for sure.
You're welcome, man. And you touched on it. As Black men, we don't really talk about these kind of things. And that's why I appreciated that lunch we had, because, it wasn't just superficial talk. It was about real issues and real things going on in our lives. And I think we need to do more of that. I feel like, when I stopped drinking, like when I was drinking, it was to escape, like you said, the issues, the problems, whatever it was. But then when you stop, it's like, oh, shoot, you got to address those. You got to face those.
Right.
And that's what I'm going through now. There's no way to run away. You can't run away and hide in a bottle or anything like that. And so I encourage people, man, and especially in my life, I want more of those deeper connections. I want more of those heart-to-heart talks, because, we're all in this together, man. And sometimes life, kicks our butt, man.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in a household where you didn't show your emotions. You didn't, my dad's famous saying was, take care of yourself, take care of yourself, But sometimes you need to lean on people too, man, and ask for help and share and become connected. And that's the journey I'm going through right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the counseling part, man, I would recommend everybody go through it. Like, because sometimes it's like you don't know what you're dealing with. And it may take somebody else to listen to you and talk to you and kind of hear your story to be like, okay, and kind of uncover things to help you work through it. So I know that was a big thing for me. So like I said, definitely appreciate that. But one of the things I always ask, and I the name of the podcast is the Leave Your Legacy podcast, and I kind of talked to you a little bit about it. But everyone leaves a legacy, regardless of who you are, where you grew up, what you do, socioeconomical, whatever. There is someone that you are paving the way for, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. So my question to you is, what does leaving a legacy mean to you?
That's a great question. And I've thought about it. And honestly, I feel my greatest duty when it comes to my legacy is to try to make the world a better place. And one way I can tangibly do that is in raising my kids. So my children will ultimately be my legacy. And I think, when you look at pretty much everybody, like the one thing that we all have in common, the people that have kids, we may not all be wealthy. We may not all be able to do this or that. But when you have kids, they're kind of your legacy. They're, after you're dead and gone, they're going to be the ones that are around. And so for me, when you say leaving my legacy, I'm trying my damnedest to make sure that my two kids, my 13-year-old son, my 11-year-old daughter, grow up to be productive members of this society, to carry the values that I carry and to have an impact. With that being said, I also understand the platform that I have as being a play-by-play broadcaster for an NBA team as an African-American from inner city Philadelphia. And so I think, to me, my legacy shouldn't just be what happens in my household. It's how do I touch other people as well? How do I inspire other people? Whether it's, young boys and girls that look like me, whether it's, people who, are alcoholics, there's so many different ways I feel like, your legacy can impact others. And that's what I'm trying to do. And so when you say, what does leaving your legacy means? It's multi. It's not just one thing.
Right.
It's raising kids that can go on and be productive members of society. It's giving back to the community that you came from. It's inspiring others and opening the door to others. And so I don't want my legacy to just be Kyle Draper was a play-by-play announcer for the Sacramento Kings. I want my legacy to be that dude right there. He helped inspire others to want to do play-by-play. He helped inspire others to not want to do alcohol or drugs. He helped inspire others to be great fathers to their kids. And so, when you talk about leaving your legacy, to me, it's inspiring others, whether it's your own children or people outside your home.
I appreciate that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, we'll have a little fun too as we get out of here.
Okay.
So I do rapid fire questions at the end of every show. And so first question is, if you could go one place for a relaxing vacation, where would you go and why?
Man, relaxing vacation. I usually don't take many of those because I have them damn kids, man. You know what I mean?
Right.
I love my kids, but my God. I ain't never been to Turks and Caicos, man. Okay. Everybody says that's nice.
Yeah.
Blue water and everything. It'd have to be on the beach somewhere. Give me a Turks and Caicos vacation for about 7 days.
Okay.
Just chilling, unplugged, no devices, no phones, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And just put my feet in the sand and relax.
Yeah, definitely. You got to take a relaxing vacation, Kyle.
Yeah.
All right, number 2. What is your go-to comfort food?
Oh my God.
Is this going to be good or you just can't think of one? What is it?
I know, right? I mean, so I'm a French fry guy.
Okay.
I will order fries at any restaurant.
Okay.
It's like, that is my thing, French fries.
Yeah.
So I'm a burger and fries guy.
Yeah.
I would say burger and fries.
Okay.
At any place. And if I'm eating burger and fries, I'll be honest with you, it probably means I've probably had kind of a bad day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where I'm like, you know what, screw that. I'm going to get a burger and fries.
Yeah.
No milkshake on the side, though. Trust me on that. I won't do the milkshake, but I do love milkshakes.
Yeah.
So that might be another comfort food also.
Okay.
But when I'm having a bad day, I'm like, you know what? Let me just go get a burger.
That sounds good. Sounds good. All right. This one might be a little bit tougher. If you're stuck on an island and can only listen to one artist, who would that be and why?
Dang.
Yeah.
That is tough. Because I like pretty much all genres of music, not country that much.
Yeah.
Really, but I'm a Motown guy. I'm an old school hip hop guy. I like some of the new stuff. One artist, I would say Lil Wayne, probably.
Lil Wayne?
Lil Wayne. I was going to say Public Enemy, like I'm a big Public Enemy, Run DMC, Mobb Deep also, but I'm going to go Lil Wayne just because he spanned from the mid-90s to today. So his catalog is so deep, so long. So I wouldn't get burned out on it.
Okay. I like that. I personally am not a Lil Wayne dude. If I was going to pick any artist, it'd be DMX. That's my dude. That's my dude. That is my guy.
I just played some DMX for my kids the other day, man. I had to school them, man. People don't understand. DMX had that run, man. Remember he had 2 #1 albums in the same year?
Yeah.
He was that guy, man.
It's funny because when Michelle was pregnant with Chris and Keegan, I played DMX all the time. And whenever I would play it, they would go nuts. And she'd tell me, like, you can't play DMX in the car when I'm riding. And It's funny because I didn't know if they still liked it. So one time we were in the car and they were playing and they were both singing like every word. And I'm like, yeah, that's from when they learned it in the womb.
Right. I love it. Hey, that's one of our things we got to pass on to our kids, man.
Yeah.
That the great music that we had growing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, hey, man, first of all, I want to say thank you. But every show I always have a quote. And there was a quote I found that I felt really exemplified you and where you're at. As I was thinking about, what you and I have talked about and the questions I asked, I wanted to put this one out there. And it says, it's a quote on faith. And it says, faith is sitting in the middle of the storm of your life and still being able to close your eyes and picture the sunny skies, being able to feel the better days coming despite the storm all around you. And I think, you had those moments, but you always had the foresight. You knew what you wanted to do, and going out on a limb and going to Boston and then saying, hey, I got to go to Sacramento. Like, right. I think, that you have to lean into faith sometimes, and you definitely did. And you're definitely reaping the benefits. And Sacramento is I mean, they are privileged to have you as their play-by-play guy and a public persona. And so I just have enjoyed getting to know you this year. You've said a lot of good things about my kids, so, I can get behind that too. But I just want to say thank you for coming on, and it's been a pleasure having you. And yeah, man, I am so excited about what is happening in Sacramento right now.
Yo, man, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate everything you're doing, man. I appreciate Keegan and the love he showed me throughout the season. And you're right, man. Sacramento is not that city anymore, that franchise where, you know what? Oh, they're going to lose. They're not going to, we're back up right now. And I'm excited about this off season, and I'm ready to get back out there, to be honest with you. I'm missing the basketball already.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm not watching any more NBA though, just so you know. All right. Well, thanks again for everybody for joining the show. I want to let everyone know you can now find our podcast on Spreaker, the iHeartRadio platform. Continue to go to our YouTube channel, the Talk About Network. Remember to subscribe, give us a like, hit the notification button so you know when a new episode drops. You can also find our podcast on Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, I'm Keegan Murray, your host. Until next time. This podcast is sponsored by Storyline Multimedia. Storyline is an Iowa City-based media company that specializes in creating high-quality video, photo, and audio productions for local businesses. Not only that, but they also produce a number of podcasts, including this one. So if you're interested in sharing the story of your business with the world, contact them today by visiting StorylineMultimedia.com. And remember, your story matters.